Old Tucson, Arizona, September 1960. The sun hangs like a merciless eye in the cloudless sky, pushing the temperature past 100 degrees before noon. This is desert heat at its most punishing, the kind that turns metal too hot to touch and makes every breath feel like swallowing fire. The movie set sprawls across the Cimarron landscape like a mirage made real, false fronts and wooden sidewalks baking under the relentless assault of high-altitude sunshine. The crew of Cimarron moves with the deliberate economy of men working in extreme conditions, conserving energy wherever possible, while maintaining the punishing schedule that keeps Hollywood productions profitable. Sweat stains darken every shirt within minutes of putting it on. Water breaks become mandatory rather than optional. The smart money says this heat will break at least one man before the day is through. Old Tucson exists for one purpose: to provide Hollywood with an authentic Western setting that looks real on camera without the complications of filming in actual frontier towns. Built specifically for movie making, it captures the essence of the American frontier experience while offering modern conveniences like electrical power and catered lunch. The irony is not lost on anyone that the most authentic-looking Western town in America exists purely for the creation of fiction. Charles Bronson stands in whatever shade he can find, 39 years old, and carved from the same unforgiving stone as the mountains that ring this desert valley. A former coal miner from Pennsylvania, Bronson carries himself with the quiet menace of a man who has spent his life in places where weakness gets you killed. His face shows the accumulated damage of hard living, lines etched by coal dust and sun, and the constant tension of existing on the edge of financial survival. Bronson has come to Hollywood later than most, building his reputation one supporting role at a time through sheer determination and an almost supernatural ability to project danger without saying a word. He doesn't have the classical good looks that usually define leading men, but he possesses something more valuable in the world of westerns: authenticity. When Bronson appears on screen as a gunfighter or outlaw, audiences believe him completely, because everything about him suggests that violence is never more than a heartbeat away. If you want to see more stories about Hollywood legends who prove themselves through genuine toughness rather than manufactured image, subscribe to Glenn Ford Hidden Legacy. Glenn Ford sits 20 yards away in the minimal shade provided by a canvas awning, 44 years old and appearing perfectly comfortable despite the brutal heat. Where other actors wilt and complain about the conditions, Ford seems to draw energy from the desert environment, as if the harsh landscape speaks to something fundamental in his character. His costume looks as fresh as it did at sunrise, his bearing as composed as if he were sitting in an air-conditioned office rather than an Arizona furnace. Ford holds his position as the film's leading man through a combination of natural charisma and technical excellence that sets him apart from his contemporaries. But what really distinguishes him from every other actor working in westerns is his approach to firearms. While others treat guns as props to be handled convincingly enough to fool cameras, Ford has transformed himself into something approaching a genuine fast-draw artist. The holster on Ford's right hip appears unremarkable at first glance, brown leather worn smooth from constant use but showing none of the decorative elements that mark it as a costume piece. The Colt single-action army inside sits with the casual readiness of a surgeon's scalpel, precisely positioned and perfectly maintained. To Ford, this is not a theatrical prop, but a precision instrument calibrated for a specific purpose. For the past hour, Ford has been practicing his draw during breaks in filming, working through subtle variations in stance and grip that would be invisible to casual observers but represent the difference between professional competence and genuine mastery. Each repetition is performed with mechanical precision, the same movement repeated endlessly until muscle memory eliminates the possibility of error. Bronson watches from his position in the shade, studying Ford's technique with the analytical attention of a craftsman observing another craftsman's work. What he sees impresses him from a technical standpoint but troubles him on a more fundamental level. Ford's approach to gunfighting seems too clean, too calculated, too removed from the raw violence that Bronson believes defines authentic Western conflict. The philosophical difference between the two men extends beyond mere technique into fundamentally different worldviews. Bronson represents the old-school approach to screen violence, where authenticity comes from genuine toughness and the willingness to absorb punishment. Ford represents something newer and more refined, where skill eliminates the need for suffering and precision replaces endurance as the measure of effectiveness. During a break in filming while the crew repositions cameras and adjusts lighting for the afternoon sun, Bronson approaches Ford with the deliberate stride of a man who has made a decision. His boots raise small clouds of dust with each step, and the sound carries clearly in the desert stillness, despite the background noise of film production. "Glenn," Bronson says, his voice carrying that distinctive gravelly quality that makes every word sound like a threat wrapped in politeness. Ford looks up from checking his weapon, acknowledging Bronson's presence with a slight nod. "Charlie, how you holding up in this heat?" "Heat doesn't bother me much," Bronson replies, which is clearly true based on his apparent comfort, despite the brutal conditions. "Been watching you practice over there. Impressive technique." "Practice makes permanent," Ford says, sliding his Colt back into its holster with the smooth efficiency that characterizes all his movements. "Better to get it right in rehearsal than discover problems when it matters." Bronson settles onto a wooden crate positioned to catch what little shade the awning provides, his movements suggesting coiled strength held in careful check. When he speaks again, his voice carries an edge that wasn't there before. "That's just it though, isn't it? All that technical precision, all those calculated movements. Makes you damn near perfect with that iron, but it also makes you something like a machine. Question is, does all that mechanical perfection make you a better gunfighter or just a more efficient one?" Ford's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his posture that suggests increased attention. "Different question, Charlie. Depends on what you're trying to accomplish." "In the old days," Bronson continues, "men didn't have time for all that technical preparation. They learned to fight by fighting, learned to be fast by needing to be fast or ending up dead. Raw talent, raw courage, raw necessity. That's what made them dangerous." Bronson stands and assumes a fighting stance that showcases his own approach to gunfighting, where Ford's technique emphasizes economy of motion and mechanical precision. Bronson's style radiates barely controlled violence. His draw, when it comes, is fast and brutal, the Colt clearing leather in a motion that speaks of desperate necessity rather than practiced perfection. The time is respectable, perhaps 0.6 of a second from movement to aim. More importantly, the draw carries an aura of authenticity that no amount of technical training can replicate. This is how men drew guns when their lives depended on it, with grim determination and acceptance of violence as a necessary tool for survival. "That's honest gunfighting," Bronson says, holstering his weapon with the same brutal efficiency. "No fancy technique, no mechanical perfection. Just the willingness to do what needs doing when it needs doing." Ford stands slowly, brushing dust from his costume with movements that appear casual but suggest careful consideration of everything Bronson has said. When he speaks, his voice carries no defensiveness or challenge, just the quiet confidence of a man who knows exactly what he can accomplish. "You're right about one thing, Charlie," Ford says, adjusting his gun belt with the precise attention to detail that characterizes everything he does. "All that technical work does make a man into something like a machine. Question is, what kind of machine do you want to be?" The challenge, though delivered in Ford's characteristically understated manner, carries unmistakable weight. The crew, sensing that something significant is about to unfold, begins to gather at a respectful distance. Even in the brutal heat, the prospect of witnessing a demonstration of professional skill draws people like magnetism draws iron. Bronson nods, understanding that he's pushed the conversation beyond casual discussion into something more serious. "All right, Glenn. Show me what all that mechanical perfection looks like when it matters." Ford takes 3 steps toward the center of the open space, positioning himself where everyone can see clearly what's about to happen. There's no drama in his preparation, no theatrical stance or obvious positioning for maximum effect. He simply stands there, right side angled toward an imaginary opponent, hand relaxed at his side. The silence that follows is profound despite the presence of 40 film industry professionals. The heat seems to intensify the quiet, making every small sound carry with unusual clarity. Somewhere in the distance, a roadrunner calls to its mate, the sound floating across the desert like a voice from another world. Ford's breathing slows and deepens as he prepares for the demonstration that will either validate his approach or expose its limitations. His eyes focus on a point far beyond the physical boundaries of the movie set, seeing something that exists only in his mind but has become absolutely real to his body. In that moment, Ford transforms from a middle-aged actor in costume into something far more dangerous and focused. His hand moves. The motion happens so fast that most observers miss the beginning of the draw entirely. Ford's hand doesn't appear to travel from his side to his gun so much as simply materialize wrapped around the Colt's grip. The weapon clears leather in a movement so smooth and economical that it seems to occur outside the normal flow of time. One instant, the gun rests in its holster. The next instant, it's pointed with mechanical precision at the spot where an opponent's heart would be located. There's no visible transition between these states, no moment when the watching crew can point and say that's when the draw began. The gun is simply not drawn, and then it is drawn, and the space between those conditions seems to exist in some realm beyond normal human perception. 0.4 seconds from stillness to lethal readiness, 0.4 seconds to end a human life or spare it according to Ford's will alone. The demonstration is so fast that several crew members blink and miss it entirely, their minds struggling to process what their eyes have reported. Ford holds the aim for exactly 1 second, long enough for everyone present to understand what they've witnessed, then smoothly returns the weapon to its holster. The Colt slides home with a soft click that sounds like thunder in the desert silence. The movie set freezes in complete stillness. 40 professional film workers stand motionless under the Arizona sun, temporarily forgetting the heat and their discomfort in the face of something that challenges their understanding of human capability. The director stops discussing camera angles with his cinematographer. The script supervisor lets her clipboard drop to her side. Even the catered lunch crew pauses in their preparation to stare at the man who has just redefined their understanding of what speed actually means. Bronson stares at Ford's holster, then at Ford's face, then back at the holster where the gun now rests, as if nothing extraordinary has happened. His own considerable experience with firearms provides no framework for processing what he's just witnessed. The speed wasn't just impressive or professional or even exceptional. The speed was literally beyond the range of normal human capability. "Jesus Christ, Glenn," Bronson whispers, and the profanity carries the weight of genuine awe rather than casual exclamation. Ford adjusts his costume with the same attention to detail he brings to everything else, smoothing fabric and checking positioning as if he's just completed a routine wardrobe change, rather than a demonstration of lethal skill that will be discussed for decades. When he speaks, his voice carries the quiet authority of absolute certainty. "Toughness matters, Charlie," Ford says, meeting Bronson's eyes with steady regard. "Raw courage matters. The willingness to do what needs doing, that definitely matters. But speed is what gets you home alive to use that toughness again tomorrow." Bronson removes his hat, running one hand through his hair as he tries to process what he's experienced. In all his years of hard living and harder work, in all his experience with violence and the men who practice it professionally, he's never encountered anything that approaches what Ford just demonstrated. The speed wasn't just superior, it was categorically different from anything in his previous experience. "I've seen fast men before," Bronson says slowly, his voice carrying a humility that few people have ever heard from the naturally confident actor. "Soldiers, miners, men who had to be quick to stay alive. But what I just saw, that wasn't just fast, that was something else entirely." Ford walks closer to Bronson, close enough to place one hand on the other man's shoulder in a gesture that combines respect with reassurance. "Different tools for different jobs, Charlie. Your way works when you need to absorb punishment and keep fighting. My way works when you need to end things before the fighting starts. Both have their place." Bronson nods slowly, understanding something he's never quite grasped before. In all his years of building his reputation as Hollywood's toughest man, he's focused on endurance and the ability to withstand damage. But Ford represents something different: the possibility of avoiding damage entirely through superior preparation and technical excellence. The two men shake hands, the gesture carrying the weight of mutual professional respect between craftsmen who have found common ground despite their different approaches. Bronson's grip is powerful, reflecting years of manual labor and physical conditioning. Ford's grip is controlled, reflecting years of technical training and precision development. Both represent mastery achieved through different paths toward the same ultimate goal. As filming resumes and the crew returns to their various responsibilities, word of Ford's demonstration spreads through the old Tucson facility with the speed of desert wildfire. By evening, every person working on the production has heard some version of the story, though the details change and evolve with each telling until they take on mythological proportions. Bronson never forgets what he witnessed that afternoon in the Arizona desert. In later interviews, when asked about the most impressive display of skill he ever saw during his film career, Bronson always gives the same answer. "I once saw Glenn Ford draw a gun so fast it made me question everything I thought I knew about speed," he says. "Made me realize there are levels of mastery that exist beyond what most people ever imagine possible." Ford continues his career with the same quiet professionalism that has always characterized his work, carrying his extraordinary ability like a craftsman carries his tools, as instruments rather than trophies. The demonstration at Old Tucson becomes part of his legend, but Ford himself never discusses it publicly or uses it to enhance his reputation. The desert keeps its own counsel, and the wind that blows through the Cimarron landscape carries no tales of human competition or professional jealousy. Only the enduring silence of stone and sky, and the knowledge that some truths are too profound for casual conversation, too perfect for anything but respectful silence. For more stories about Hollywood legends who earned respect through genuine mastery rather than manufactured toughness, subscribe to Glenn Ford Hidden Legacy.